man they were looking for in this cave, killed a lot of innocent people in the process of all of this, but it suddenly sort of withered away, and today you never hear about Afghanistan anymore. But what you do hear about is Iraq, and although this is a long story, long relationship between the US and Iraq and so on, and the Gulf War, which we don't have to go into here, but suddenly, although Saddam Hussein hasn't changed particularly in 10 years, suddenly he's now depicted as having all kinds of objectionable viruses under his pillow, and atomic weapons being produced in backyards of paint factories, and really rather implausible picture of the threat that he might at some stage pose to somebody. This all sounds to just ordinary mortals extraordinarily thin, but if you look at it in the context of America's need for access to oil, you could, and I'm not saying this is the truth, but you could at least say that their new interest in Iraq is a response to having discovered that they're not finding their solution in the Caspian. Now, of course, if they do invade Iraq, who knows what the consequence will be. And I think there's a huge, they themselves are probably misled. I mean, you can't expect these governments to have much real understanding of what's involved. So I think they can just show up there and put a puppet regime in command and simply open the tap and solve the problem. But Iraq's oil, they've found about 90 billion barrels of oil in Iraq, of which 50 lie in three fields, only three big ones. The first, Kirkuk, found in 1927. Now, these are old fields, and as we've discussed earlier, you know, it's not just opening a tap. You have to reconfigure the wells, you have to drill infill wells. There's a huge amount of work, and probably they've been badly managed in the recent past, so there's remedial action. And then there are a lot of smaller fields that have not yet been put on production, so you've got to drill them up. They don't deliver so much as the big old ones. And still more, you've got to look for new ones all the time. And I think one can say that the old Iraq Petroleum Company found most of the obvious big prospects long ago. So I think it's an enormous mistake to imagine you can just show up, install a puppet regime of some kind, and hope, quite apart from the continuing acts of sabotage, and snipers are behind every palm tree, even under ideal conditions, it would still be a long, long time before production could grow significantly to have any real world impact. So that I think is a mistake, if, and I don't think it's entirely to do with oil. I think there's a large Israeli content to this action as well, but oil, I'm sure, is sort of part of the assessment that is behind all of this. And of course, you could also foresee, as Mo Mowlam, the recent British cabinet minister, published not long ago, that she interpreted this whole thing as an invitation to a breakdown of the Middle East political system, with public outrage throughout the place, the fall of the Sauds in Saudi Arabia in response to popular outrage, which in turn would give the United States the right almost, or the opportunity to move in and take the Saudi oil fields, which in fact would be a much easier military target than Iraq would be. So, you know, if you want to take Middle East oil, the place to take it is Saudi Arabia, and one can see the deterioration of relations between the Sauds and America has been developing over the last few months. So one can read all kinds of scenarios into this situation, and I think you can be fairly sure that the governments themselves are the last people to understand what they're really doing, if history is anything to go by. So we face this unbelievable Third World War, really, that is probably triggered by all of these considerations, not many of which really have a real substance. I mean, the irony of it is, I mean, it's one thing to go and take some place by the right of conquest and kill millions of people in the process. This wouldn't be the first time this has happened. But to do it all and then find there's no prize at the end of the rainbow is really doubly tragic.
What is your assessment of the idea that extra Iraqi oil may be used to reduce oil price and destabilize Saudi Arabia?
I don't think, as I say, if it were a case of being able to go into Iraq and open the tap, flood the world with oil, that would indeed drop the price of oil. That would in fact destabilize Saudi Arabia, who depends on oil revenue, but I can't imagine why anybody would want to do that exactly. If that were the case, it could have that consequence. And I don't think it's in anybody's, least of all the American interest, to drop the price of oil worldwide, because that they simply need more of the stuff, and at low price there's less incentive for anybody to produce. You create tensions throughout the world. So this would be the very worst thing anybody could do, is to drop the price of oil radically. But what is much more likely is that they put one foot in Iraq and the whole of the Middle East erupts in popular outrage at this unjustified attack, which would be seen as a very, very negative thing. And I think the history of that region is that these people don't give up easily, you know. Suicide bombers, and it doesn't take much to blow up a pipeline, you know. It's one camel with a bit of explosive on its back can do a pretty good job. So you don't need sophisticated weaponry and everything. It's just the feelings of the people that you're involved with, and I think that's the great risk of this situation.
What is Canada's situation?
Canada is, of course, a large country. Most of it is shield country, lacking oil potential at all. This emphasizes the fact that oil is concentrated in a few places that have the right geology. And as far as Canada is concerned, there are really three areas of interest. There's the old Alberta province in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, which was started, I think, in 1947, if I'm not mistaken, with the Leduc field was the first field there, and Alberta is now an extremely mature conventional oil province, really approaching the end of its life, with ever smaller fields and less activity, really. So the days of Albertan conventional oil are closing. Then, I don't know, some 20 years or so ago, there was an interest in the Mackenzie Delta in the north. And here you enter into the Arctic domain, which is not only operationally difficult, but the geology of most of the Arctic region is gas-prone. And the reason for this is that it suffered from the weight of fluctuating ice caps in the geological past, which depressed the rocks into the gas-generating windows. And furthermore, oil source rocks tend to be formed more or less in tropical regions because you need the heat to create the algae. But due to plate tectonic movement, some formerly low latitudes have moved into higher latitudes. So, but generally speaking, the Arctic province is gas province. They drilled a lot explored quite a bit in the Arctic islands of Canada, and they found some gas finds, but not much oil. There is, I think, there's a couple of oil fields in the Mackenzie Delta, some offshore, that have a potential, but it's mainly gas. So, and then the third place of interest was off the east coast, off Newfoundland, where a fairly small conventional Jurassic clay has been found, and there's a couple of oil. Hibernia is the main field there. It's got certain problems too, because it's an iceberg belt, so they have the problems of defending the platform against floating icebergs. And they found another field there recently too. This is a nice little province, but it's small. So Canada has really very limited potential, future potential for conventional oil. Now, it has huge amounts of tar sands. The resource is huge. There's no shortage of the stuff itself. And the problem is the extraction rate. Up to now, the economic limit is 75 meters of overburden. You have to dig out 75 meters of rock to get to the deposit, and the whole process of extracting this heavy oil is you've got to centrifuge it and add caustic soda and add hydrogen and fuel the plants. And there's a lot. It's an industrial process. It's a mining industrial process, in effect. So the fuel costs of the tar sand processing plants are going to rise, and also the whole process uses an enormous amount of water. And recently I've read